So I had this podcast in the can that I was talking about. And when I originally started this podcast, I was going to lead off with this as my first episode. But as I had my guests lined up, I was more excited about putting the guest on the show, and the focus is more on them than actually me. But after getting a few episodes under my belt, it was my intention to put out this show to give myself an introduction so my audience would know who I am and a little bit of my perspective on where I was coming from and why I'm doing what I'm doing, and kind of how it led up to here. And this is just part of an evolution. That's my story. So I've done this little intro here for my introductory show, because like I said, I've been sitting on this episode for a while, but the timing was kind of bad to put it out because we have the beginning of the year coming up, and I almost felt like I needed almost like a 2018 type of resolution show, but I didn't want to make it that theme. So now the timing's right. Hit the music and we'll get it started. What's up, everybody? I'm Christopher Thompson. Welcome to the Mega Talks podcast. This episode, I'm giving you the drop and giving you the history about me. And rather than, a typical interview setup, I'm just going to give you guys the scoop about who I am, my history, and, how I became to do this podcast. But as far back as I can remember, I wanted to become a musician. Pretty much started as I wanted to become a keyboard player and a guitar player. I can remember getting my first keyboard way before I got my guitar, and taking piano lessons from one of the girls in the town where I grew up. But as things progressed, I grew into the guitar and got my first one from my uncle. But a lot of my musical influence actually comes from listening to the radio before school. And I can remember listening to, I think it was Carve Radio, and listening to those songs. I had heard a variation of a lot of different songs, mixture of things from Kenny Rogers to Kenny Loggins, that old Jose Cuervo song, a lot of eclectic blends of music from things from like rock and roll and country were all mixed together on the radio. That developed my taste for music. I can remember grabbing, my wiffle ball bat out of the room and pretending like I was playing the guitar in the mirror. And some of those songs, were country songs from Glenn Campbell to like I said, Kenny Loggins. But as things moved on, so did my taste, and so did the things that done around the house. I always listened to the radio. I always kept a radio around. Coming from those days, my radio influences moved on to different radio stations. Some of them rock radio, some of them more of a top 40 radio, some of them a hip hop radio. Some of the biggest stations around at that time, I can't remember if it was Magic 105, but it was 105.1 was always the rock station that I would go to, listen to my rock songs. I remember going to 102.3 and listen to the more top 40 type of songs, occasional rock songs there. Carve Radio, you heard a blend of everything before it became more of a country station. After that, I had some occasions where I called the radio stations trying to make requests for certain songs that I wanted to play because I wanted to record them onto my tape deck. So that was some of your earlier days of what you guys probably know today as downloading. We recorded it onto a tape deck. Eventually we got into double tape decks on little jam boxes. After I record a song off the radio, I would take the double tape deck, hit the pause button, and I would actually cut up songs and make my own songs with, several different things, trying to keep the beats matched, but I'll blending them back and forth together. I had to do it that way because I didn't have turntables to do it in a live setting, so I made do with the things that I had. I couldn't record songs then, but I did have an old tape recorder. Actually, it's my sister's tape recorder where I'd make attempts at recording songs, but didn't really have an outlet because I didn't have nothing but a keyboard at the time. And it was hard to record just a keyboard because you needed the inputs if you're into the technological side of it. But as time went on, my goal was to get a guitar. And as I said earlier, I got my first guitar from my uncle. We had taken a trip one day to Little Rock, and when we went by his house, he actually had the guitar and the amp sitting out. And first time I picked it up, it was already pretty much in tune as far as I can remember. I just made, start picking on the strings. I almost made a little song right there on the spot. I didn't have any idea what I was doing, but I was hitting a little bit of open things, open chords, or, whatever. I couldn't wait to get it home so I could hook up the amp so I could hear how it sounds. But got home, the amp didn't have as much gain on it as I wanted, because I wanted tight distortion on the guitar, and I wanted the guitar to scream. And give you an idea of around what year this was, it's a song by Billy Idol on the radio called Rebel Yell. And if you've heard the song, it's got some awesome guitar in it. And I would sit around the house watching this video and looking at him and thinking, that's the way I want to play guitar. Which, little to my knowledge, did I know he used a ray gun in that song. But I would hook my guitar up to the bigger stereo, and I could get distortion out of it. And I would try and make that guitar talk just like Steve Stevens did in Billy Idol's Rebel Yell song. Had a little success, but, that was some of my earlier days of starting off playing guitar. Actually took lessons at one time, and during that time, the lessons weren't what I expected them to be, because they were more like playing Home on the Range, kind of one note type of songs, and I was more into power chords, rock chords, the D5s, A5s. Like I said, I want to make the guitar scream, and playing Home on the Range didn't give me that outlet that I was looking for. So eventually, I can't remember, I probably took 3 or 4 lessons, and I stopped taking the lessons. I played more by ear than anything. But in high school, I remember some of my friends getting in their vehicles and listening to Joe Satriani's Surfing with the Alien for the first time. And that was, I'd heard the things like the Rebel Yell, but listening to Surfing with the Alien totally changed it. I mean, it was all instrumental music. I still like music with lyrics, but I knew from then on what I wanted to make was totally just straight guitar from beginning to the end. I wrote songs with lyrics, but my main gig was the instrumental song. That was pretty much my bread and butter, and kind of still is to this day. I prefer the instrumental. And it's not just the guitar or the keyboard that got me into the music, because before that, even on, as I was listening to the radio, making my own mixes on the double tape decks, I would always listen to the Casey Kasem countdowns on the weekends. I would wake up pretty early on Saturday morning just so I could hear the countdown and hear the long distance dedications. But I would sometimes I would actually make my own charts to those songs that he would count down, and I would write down sometimes I would do the last 20 songs, write them down on a piece of paper. Sometimes I would get 30 songs in. If I woke up early enough, I may be able to get just about all 40 songs, but it was something that I'd done just so I could compare one week to the other on the countdowns. And sometimes during the week, I would pretend I was a radio DJ in my room, and I would just, if I recorded some songs, I would try and link those songs together, which were, near impossible to do, because when you have a single tape deck, you're not going to be a radio DJ, but you can always imagine. And I always tried to, I thought maybe I could turn that radio into some way, instead of input, I wanted to turn it into an output and actually, be the DJ. But those are the things I knew that I wanted to do once I got older. I just didn't know how I was going to do it then. Now, I always had the musical influence in our family. Coming up, listening to the records in the living room, the family dancing, having fun. My mom would sing, my sister would dance, and I always pretend like I would playing the music sometimes. Wasn't too much interested in dancing at that point because I was more into being the musician. But I won't forget those songs that were played on the radio and some of the records that we still have today that I can play on my turntable that I have today. It's something to reach back and be able to capture those moments just by spinning a song on the record player. But as time moved on, I moved in after junior high. I used my uncle's guitar for a few years, and during that time, I cut my teeth on that guitar to Joe Satriani's Surfing with the Alien and things like, Van Halen, some of the Van Halen albums and Whitesnake records coming up through the years. A goal of mine then was to own a guitar where I actually had a whammy bar on the guitar, so I could do the dive bombs like Satriani, like Eddie Van Halen would do, because it just had a hardtail, couldn't do all the the fancy tricks. So once I became old enough and I found out I could actually get a job and earn some money to put towards a guitar, a friend of mine in high school, he had a Kramer guitar, had a whammy bar on it, and it was between that and owning an Ibanez. Now, at the time, Ibanez to me was a more expensive guitar and is way out of my price range or what I was willing to spend. But I found a job, and I worked hard. I think it was probably, I can't remember. I worked hard for probably about a month, and I worked every hour that I could work, trying to earn every penny that I could earn to buy myself that guitar. As soon as I saved up $100 and something, I put the guitar on layaway. And once I'd done that, I knew I had to keep working because I had to finish off paying for the guitar, naturally. But I finally got it paid off, and shoot, I think that guitar is almost $500 what I paid for it at the time. Today's prices, you can get them for much cheaper. But at the time, it was like walking into the candy store and going to Olson's and looking at the guitars up on the shelf. And I remember that day pulling my guitar down and telling them that's what I wanted to buy. And as the payoff was well worth it, because on that guitar, I continued my adventures of instrumental music and dominating every note that I knew I could between Steve Vai, Eddie Van Halen, Joe Satriani, Eric Johnson, anybody that's, that had a guitar in their hand. I wanted to learn the notes. And I had more than a pocket full of guitar solos back from the late 70s and early 80s that I knew I wanted to be able to play. But little did I know, I had my hands full, but it was a blast. Once I was able to get that guitar into my house, and my mom had bought me an amp, I was able to go out and buy some pedals, more distortion pedals, to make it louder. And some of those days that I spent in my room, some of the weekends I would spend in my room, I would wake up playing guitar and I would go to sleep playing guitar. Sometimes I would play guitar so late that the house would just get dark and I would realize that I was the only one awake, and I probably need to, turn the guitar off so other people can sleep. But I can't tell you how many hours I spent just playing that guitar. And I wore it out. It lasted a long time. I gotta say, it lasted until the late 90s before it could barely hold a tune. But during that time, my diverse musical taste, I was listening to, the Joe Satriani's, the Bon Jovi things, and CDs were invented, which was a wonderful thing because we could rewind the song, or I could maybe rewind a part in a section of a song and, memorize that song or that little section or play it on guitar. Now, once our household got a CD player, it also came with double tape decks, and it also came with the record player. And me, with my fascination with record players, I had these little floppy records that I would get out of my guitar magazines, and I could throw them up there and play those and play along with them. One of them was Joe Satriani's One Big Rush. And I remember listening to, I can't remember the artist's name, but I remember the song was called Time Odyssey. I would take those records and I would put them on top of each other, use one as a slip mat, and I would scratch the record. And I done my little scratching, my DJing techniques with those records, and actually broke the record player. So the record player didn't really last that long. I didn't know that the record players then weren't designed to do those type of things. But there wasn't too much more listening to records after that. I still listen to the CDs and the tapes, but no more record player. Not soon after that, around my junior year in high school, I'd had some experience under my belt. Thought I was a pretty good guitar player, decent at the time. So sometimes I'd take my guitar to school, and sometimes we'd play around at lunchtime and things like that. But we had our talent shows in high school, and I'd already knew that I wanted to play Eruption by Eddie Van Halen at the talent show. One thing I didn't know when I was testing out my amp at school, that my amp was just way too small to play in front of a crowd. So we had to figure out how I was going to be able to play it really loud in front of everybody. Sound system really wasn't doing what I wanted to, and then I didn't have the experience under my belt to mic the cab like I should have. So I called up my friend. He had a larger amp, and I hooked my amp and his amp together along with my pedals, and just basically cranked up the amp as loud as he could get. And when I was rehearsing, I knew the performance was lacking something, because if you've listened to Eruption, it's got drums in it. So I called up another friend. He was a grade below me, and I'm like, hey man, we need to get together and play some music, jam a little bit, because I want to do the Eruption for the talent show, and I want you to be my drummer. So we practiced together. He had a small Gorilla amp at his house, and the drums were much louder than that Gorilla amp, but we got our timing down and the things that we wanted to do. So we went up there in the talent show, and to everybody that watched, I think we killed it. But to us, it was a little choppy, a little bit sloppy. I knew it could be better, but I mean, hey, for the first show in front of a couple hundred people, I guess, or more, we done well. But I remember getting our timing together, and the amps not being loud enough, and we actually stop the intro so I could go crank up the amps a little bit more. And when we got going, we got through the song and made it to the end. The ending was kind of awkward, and it was, it was funny for us, but we made it work, and we got a first place finish. Next year, my senior year, same type of thing. Called my drummer from the previous year. I also called, actually sent invitations out to the people who I wanted to accompany me in the show. Typed up some letters and put them in an envelope, and I delivered them to 3 other people. One of the guys I wanted to sing with us, he never did respond on the invite, but my bass player, he responded with a yes, and my drummer responded with a yes, and of course I was down. But I tell you, months before the show was coming up, I would bring my guitar to school, and he'd have his drums at school. We'd play at lunchtime. We'd play, any chance that we got. We would get up on stage and practice our music. Sometimes we'd practice in ROTC class or whatever chance we would get. But I have to take time here to say that, not everybody makes it along, but rest in peace. My friend Aaron Haston, he played bass with us on that performance. We called our band Snafu, and the guy on the drums named our band, and everybody got a kick out of that. We called a song that I wrote, and it's called Fubar. It's just a instrumental song. We'd originally had planned to do a song with lyrics, and it was the song from Alana Miles, the Black Velvet song. Now, after our first singer didn't respond to the invitation, I found a second singer, and it's a female singer, and I knew the girl could really sing well, and we had a rehearsal session. Probably the only time all 4 of us got together. But she wound up, I can't remember the reason, but she wasn't going to sing on the song, so we wound up leaving that song in our back pockets for an encore song. We came out and we done our thing, and the song when we performed kind of fell apart. But I just kind of went into a little type of solo thing, and finished up the solo, handed it off to my drummer. He pulled off the solo, and we went back into our original Fubar song and ended the song. Nobody could really tell, but we all, laughed about it afterwards. And we did get called for an encore. And we started into the encore after they closed the curtain. We started into the Black Velvet song. And as soon as I started the solo, the teachers came back and made us quit. So we didn't get a full encore, just a part of it. But it was very entertaining moment, and it was caught on video. Back then we had VHS tapes, so it's a fun one to go back and watch. Those experiences in high school, just performing, always leaves you a thirst to keep the performance, keep that train going. Music had evolved. There's a whole lot more rock and roll songs. You're at the end of an era with 80s rock, and you were going into the 90s when I got into college. But thankfully, when I got into college, my freshman roommate, he played guitar. He also played bass. His brothers played drums. He had another friend that played drums. We went, straight in and started another project, a project that we called Harmonic Motion, where I think we created at least almost 8 songs together. About 2 or 3 songs that I wrote, about 4 of his songs that he wrote. But I can't tell you how fun it was, because he lived about an hour away from where he was going to college. And sometimes on the weekend, we would go to his house and we would spend the day recording. And that was my first experience of recording onto a computer. He had some MIDI on the computer. He also had a ADAT that we recorded on. And the medium that we used was a Super VHS tape, went into the ADAT player. But the computer recorded all the MIDI and the triggers off the drums. So his brother was there to play the drums. My roommate, he would play the bass and the rhythm guitar, and I would play the lead guitar. So we had our instrumental thing going. It was Chris Thompson, George Schwartz, Julio Schwartz, and we were known as Harmonic Motion. We did do a recording session it was Bentonville, Arkansas, at I can't remember the name of his band, but he had a sophisticated setup. He had a reel-to-reel recorder in there, and Julio and his friend Chris went in there and recorded a drum duet together. And me and George, we recorded one of our songs there, and the recording session took place over like a Friday night and just all day Saturday. And it was simple to do. That was my first time recording on a reel-to-reel, and I got a first take that day. I played it from start to finish. Didn't have to do any overdubs or nothing like that. And to be able to do that was a really good feeling. I didn't know that it was something that was near impossible, but because we'd done some work that day. Super proud of that song. It was called the Happening Song. I didn't name it, but my roommate, he named it. He already had a name picked out for that song. But moving on from that year, I believe probably about a year and a half later, after that, my roommate, he was still there in college. I was also there in college, but his brother's friend had come to college at the same place, and we got together a musical project, and we found a singer to join us, and also a female singer. So I was playing guitar, George was playing, I believe he was playing bass guitar, and we had Chris on drums. Chad was singing, and Emily was singing also. So we were one of the first bands that you would hear with dual singers out there. Our female singer, she also played guitar, so sometimes she would play some rhythm on some songs and also sing backup. But it was a unique setup, and we called ourselves One Night Stand, and we had a stint of recording. I believe we got 3 or 4 songs that we've recorded together on a project. We played at a little coffee house place on the college campus. We played some covers. We just played some Stevie Ray Vaughan covers, Pearl Jam covers, Spin Doctors cover, a couple of those, and also Toad and the Wet Sprocket. We played a couple of their songs, and we had some original songs that we threw in the set. And I think we probably had about an hour's worth of material that we could play, maybe a little bit longer. But it was really fun to be a part of a full band project there. Wasn't playing any kind of instrumental songs, but it was really fun time to play with those guys. Now, during my college days, when I first started, my studies were architecture, and that's something that I wanted to be since I was a kid, also going along with my drawings and creative process and things like that. But my interests changed once I got there. I was more interested in the lines of criminal justice. So I went undeclared, but I also took classes under criminal justice. I also took journalism classes because it was something that I knew I wanted to do also. I remember in our journalism class, one of our intro classes that I had to put together, I had to design a radio station. And it was right up my alley because it was something that I wanted to do as a kid. And I designed call letters, the business structure, the city it was located, how we were going to advertise, how we were going to, bring in our money, what was going to draw in our audience and our demographic. We done all that stuff. All this was time way before the internet, so your perspective on things was a whole lot different than it is now. Then in college, even before college, when I was a kid, you can only dream of doing things like you could do now on the internet, such as this show that I'm doing, the podcast, or recording and getting it out there to a lot of people. Because then you had to really know somebody that knew somebody that knew somebody. And you were lucky if you were heard anywhere or discovered. And that was, time moved on. I started my career. And I started my career before college was completely over. Because as one of my other focuses was the law enforcement side or the criminal justice side. I found a job doing law enforcement. I also had my opportunity as serving on a fire department, which coming up as a young dude in the area that I was in, was watching shows like Emergency and seeing those guys and what they do on the show. Having the opportunity to be a fireman and work in law enforcement was, another dream job. And it was also just as obsessive as, being a radio DJ or guitar player in a band. The goal was to spend about 5 years in that career, which turned into a whole lot more time than I expected. Several eye-opening experiences. You learn how things worked on both sides of the law, how people behaved, good and bad, on both sides of the coin. But those experiences there, are unforgettable. They'll always stay with me. But to talk about that stuff is it's a whole other story that I don't have time to put into a podcast. But that career did lead into a marriage in the year of around 1998, which at that time I did still have the goal of, playing the guitar, performing still, getting whatever experience I could in maybe a broadcasting aspect or something along those lines of DJ interviews and things like that. So it's around the year 1999. I remember, I had to get the internet because there was a lot of things going on out there that I knew I could take advantage of and that I wanted to get my hands into. One of the things was the recording music onto the computer and getting that music out there to people, because I knew on the internet you could reach people, but had to get a computer first. So when I got one of my first things was I was looking for software like we'd used back in college to record and to get my studio set up going. It was harder than what I thought. You needed a whole lot more pieces of equipment that was really expensive, but I made do. And eventually I got myself some equipment where I could record. I started recording some things like I wanted to, the instrumental things. Went through several different processes and made a few songs, and little did I know, I hit a button one day on the software and erased every song that I had. I was able to get back everything but probably 2 or 3 different songs that I couldn't remember exactly what I done. So I lost like 3 of them. And I went on to finish up some recordings. And around 2001, I put those recordings together in a project I call One Man's Expression version 1.0. that was actually my first CD that I produced and produced by myself. I knew that I wanted to get that out there to people, and there was websites that I could get my CD out to people. Now, the second part of that was to do some promotion. And during my promotion process, called up the radio station, and I knew they were doing musical guests on Fridays. So I raised my hand to that and contacted them, and I was invited up to do a radio interview. Yeah, radio station 103.7 The Buzz. I was on the morning show. Now I got this, I originally thought I was gonna do like a little performance, a couple of songs. But when I got there, they asked me to come in to get my stuff set up, and I played a little bit, and they asked me to stay there the whole morning. So I got to spend the whole morning being part of the show. And met one of my one of the producers from the show. His name's Danny Joe Crawford. I'd always listened to him on Magic 105, and so I was able to meet him in person. You get a chance to talk to him, and he's a big Prince fan, and I'm a big Prince fan. And one of the things he wanted me to play was Purple Rain on the show. So, I put it together, played some Purple Rain on the show, and that's pretty much all he wanted to hear. And some of the other hosts, David Bassel, they were giving me little challenges to play different parts of different songs, some Stevie Ray Vaughan and things like that. And we did play one of my songs there on the air, and that really felt good to hear my own song being played across the airwave. But a lot of people that I knew wasn't expecting me to be on the show. I actually got a replay on that show. I think it was probably about a year later. I was able to listen to myself on the radio while I was in the car, and I was surprised to turn on the radio and hear myself on there. So it was a great experience, and met some great people, some friends that I still friends today. But starting a show like this gives me the opportunity to reach back out and have them as guests on my show, the same way that they invited me onto theirs. But going back a little bit to the recording phase, where I was recording the CD, I knew I needed artwork, and computer is something that you could design artwork on. I'd sourced out different programs to make art on, whatever the paint program that comes with the computer. I learned that it sucked, and it was virtually impossible to use that for any type of design. So I had to source out a better designer. I can't remember the software that I wound up using to design the cover. And actually, I think I designed the cover of my second CD off of that too. But doing those designs also helped me put together some ideas for a clothing company that I always wanted to do. And I knew a little bit how to make a t-shirt, and made some in the past with just, messing around, little crayons and iron on ideas that I'd done before, just messing around. But I made a design for a t-shirt, and my actual first company, the name was Trends. And it's TRENZ. I made myself a logo with the name, and it was originally supposed to be like more like a small design to go into like a pocket section of the t-shirt or over the pocket or something like that, not like the big prints like that you see today. So it was more toned down, but put that design together and printed it out, and I had some things. I put them on a couple of different t-shirts, a couple of different colors. Another thing I learned was the printing process. From the software, it always had a background, so whatever you put on a t-shirt was always going to be white, because if I had a red t-shirt and I put that on to the red t-shirt, the background was always white. So it wasn't exactly working out the way I'd expected. So hence the step up in the software and technology was something I was still going to have to work out. But having the internet there gave me the chance to source out different items that I wanted to create, whether it be the jeans, the shoes, the t-shirts, the hats, all those type of things that I wanted to create, sweaters, polo shirts. There's a lot of things that I had ideas on. With the internet, it gave me the power that I needed. But it was I found out it was a big task, and it took a while to put things like that together and to actually to make it grow and to make it a reality. But that didn't have any effect of me still moving forward with my music. I toured through Arkansas and a few different cities, from Juanita's and Little Rock up to Fayetteville to Russellville to Morrilton and different places, and played some live shows. I also recorded a second CD. It's called Earth Souls. And a little bit of plug there. You can get both my CDs on iTunes. They're available for purchase. But doing those projects there with my music and touring around also put me in touch with other people online. I was able to do an online music reviews for one of the websites during that era. We had a lot of local bands that played different cities from Little Rock to Fort Smith, some in Oklahoma. When they would play, they would have their CDs online, and this was MySpace days. I would do reviews on their MySpace sites and upload them to the website. I think I've done like one a week, and probably done this for about a month and a half for a website. It was out of state, but I was the idea was to promote a lot of the Arkansas bands out there. Also done online internet DJing for a website called Hard Rock Radio Live. And if I'm not mistaken, you can still go online to Hard Rock Radio Live and see some of the history there. I'm not sure if they still do the online DJ shows or not, but it's got in touch with some guys on there that had online zines and things like that. Some pretty big name guys for as far as your internet DJs go. But I was able to meet DJs from around the world, the guys from Australia to London, a lot of different places around the world, some in America, some that didn't speak any English at all. But it was a whole lot of fun and experience to rub elbows with those guys, even if it was online. I also put together my own show. That was my first podcast. After DJing online and doing the write-ups, I got my first podcast going. When podcasting first came out, it didn't cost a whole lot of money to put your things online. You just needed somebody that was willing to host your file for free. And I found somebody that would host my files online for free. So I was able to put together a podcast. Now as time grew and podcasting grew, you had to start paying for things. And I think I put in like 5 episodes in. But I was basically DJing music onto my podcast. Things that I would do on my internet DJ show, I would take it and put it to a podcast and do announcements and different things onto the podcast and promote some of my friends' music from online. Some of these guys I'm still friends with today on the social media sites like Facebook and Twitter. Sites like Jim's site. I think one guy, Angel Vivaldi, he's a pretty popular guy now. He tours around. I think he's out of New York, but met a lot of these guys online. And something they call the Gym Fest that we have down in Florida every year. A lot of guitar players are new from down there. We put together a project for Joe Satriani's, I think the second tribute CD. It's called Talk to Joe. I think it's also available on iTunes. One of my tracks was featured on his tribute CD. Now, it wasn't a Satriani track that we covered, but nonetheless, it was my original track. Track I call X. Basically, the X means 10. But it was featured on there with probably about 15, 16 other guys. But it was nice being a part of that because we were all members of Joe Satriani's site, and he gave us the go-ahead with the project, and he approved everything that we done. So being, a part of history and a part of his legacy, so to speak, is an honor and a stamp in time for the things that I wanted to do musically, especially coming from where I started. And I did, or rather I'd say I do have plans for a follow-up CD. Actually have plans for 2 follow-up CDs. One of the CDs I didn't get to put out, but had a collection of songs to put on a spiritual project. And I have another project more involves a concept type of CD of 17 songs, and I've yet to put those 2 together because this other monster in my life was created, and that monster is martial arts. And you may be wondering, well, how's martial arts such a monster? Well, as I've done in the past, my hands have been in different types of projects and things, and starting martial arts. At the time I did, I started with my son. Started when he was 5 years old, and I started doing it with him, which my sister was a big influence on us doing martial arts. We watched her do her testings, and she gave us advice on how the martial arts world works, and just that whole lifestyle. As I moved through the martial arts, the fight career kind of began, the thirst for fighting. And this is what kind of crossed over into my goals is producing a clothing line. And the clothing line was always on the back burner because a lot of your artists done merchandise. I done a stint of merchandise that I had designed when I was doing my OME project, and it was still in the mix there, but I learned I did have an outlet to create a clothing company surrounded by martial arts, which was a big market at the time, but it supplemented my thirst for producing a clothing line and also doing my martial arts, which also led into me doing different types of video interviews, online podcasts through YouTube, breakdowns, a lot of different things that I was doing during that era. Now the experience that I got in Taekwondo fueled my thirst to do kickboxing. Also led to my thirst to do MMA, which led to doing jiu-jitsu, which jiu-jitsu is a monster in itself and takes years of dedication and work to achieve, some type of success. If you're doing jiu-jitsu, you know what I'm talking about. If you've never done jiu-jitsu, get in touch with me and we'll have an experience. Now, mixing my goal to have a clothing line and the goals that I had in martial arts worked hand in hand. It allowed me to do both. And like I said before, I'd had the backbone of the clothing line put together already. I just needed to move forward with it, which my brand changed from the trends. I threw that one in the trash, and I picked up Ultimate Expression. And a lot of people were thinking, because of UFC Ultimate Fighting Championship, that the Ultimate was taken from there, which is a false. The Ultimate actually comes from one of the nicknames that I carried in high school, and my nickname was the Ultimate, or if you want to extend that out, the Ultimate Iller. Sometimes at lunch, me and my cousin and some other people would make up rhymes together. And I would come up with these little clever lines. And they were kind of comical relief lines. So that earned me the name Iller a lot of the time. And with Beastie Boys being around, the most illest, that was pretty popular phrase. And my nickname became the Ultimate Iller. So I took Ultimate from there. Now, expression, you should be able to put two and two together. Where that came from, OME was my musical project, which involved expression. So those two names put together created Ultimate Expression. And what do those two names together mean? Well, to me, it means that is your expression, your last expression, or your most valuable expression is the things that you put into the world. It's how you define yourself. It's who you are. It's your passions in life, which is not going to be the same for you guys as it is for me. Everybody has their own personal expression that they put into the world. And if you follow promotions like UFC, Bellator, Affliction, you know that a lot of the clothing companies would sponsor fighters or they would sponsor the promotions. And I knew that the two went hand to hand, and it was going to allow me to promote my brand. But not only that, it was going to give me the opportunity to promote the friends that I had inside that world, because they deserve the opportunity to get on these fight cards and to pursue their career in martial arts. I remember one of the first local MMA fights that I went to, and I looked over at some of the booths and the clothing that they were selling, and I'd already had my ideas in place, but hadn't quite released it yet because I spent a couple of years doing the planning. And I remember seeing some of the designs that they had and thinking, I should be over there and I should be selling my items and promoting my clothing line, because I felt my designs were just as competitive as the things that I was seeing, and they breathe new life into the design world. And if you want to see some of the past designs going all the way back to 2009 when it was released, check it out on Instagram at ULT Expression. You'll see a lot of the history there, and you'll see the most recent design that's available. And there's more coming in 2018. But what else went hand in hand with doing a clothing company and doing martial arts? Well, it's doing interviews, doing videos, doing blogs. A lot of different things are associated in that field. Things that I really enjoy doing. It allowed me to sponsor the fighters, to go out and do interviews with the fighters, whether it's a YouTube interview, a video interview. I would go around to the different gyms and interview the owners of the gym and put those videos onto my YouTube channel, which is, promoted my brand also. So a lot of the things they all mesh together in the things I like to do. The only obstacles I had was battling the time to do it, with working a job, managing a family, and doing the clothing line, on almost a one-man project. But looking on that, the YouTube channel that I had, I would do UFC rundowns. I would do rundowns after the fights, rundowns before the fights, because that kind of fueled my thirst to do play-by-plays. But I would do some breakdowns of the fights and some statistics there. But that's kind of going back to when I was a kid. I like doing the same thing when I watch TV on the weekend. I would watch the football games. I would keep stats on football games and do little breakdowns there and pretending like I was, the announcers quoting the stats at halftime or after the game. Just something that I always like doing. It doesn't really seem like work to me. It's it's just a lot of fun. But recording music, doing the clothing line, DJing online, all those things put together, just a natural progression for me to be doing something like this show. Now, the martial arts and the clothing was obvious, a blend. The next step, another goal that I had along with my sister, is we both wanted to start a martial arts gym together. Now, in 2012, I've moved to the current city where I lived from my hometown, and we made that a reality in 2013, where we both run our gym called Thompson Defense Academy. And it's a task and a blessing. And I gotta say, I love every chance I get to help somebody improve or to change their life in a positive direction. I'm blessed to be able to put 100% of my time into the gym and bringing it along. In 2018, there'll be more focus on bringing up the clothing line along with it. The situation from where I started the podcast to where I'm at now kind of come in full circle. But I still have the addition of having my kids with me. But I'm a single male now, but the adventure continues. So I'm still got my hands in a lot of different areas, from running the gym to doing the clothing and doing my music, all those together. And naturally in there, I have this podcast. And when I was coming up with names for the podcast, I didn't want to use any kind of brand that I already established as something else, because people tend to get confused when you throw the same name on a lot of different projects. And I was brainstorming on names at work one day, and was brainstorming, told my mom and my sister about what I was doing, and they helped me brainstorm, wrote down some names and things like that, and we decided to marinate on it for a while. And my mom texted me back, and it was just 2 words right there. It's Mega Talks. And I'm like, man, I think that's it. And as they say, the rest is history. And that was the birth of Mega Talks. So there you have it. That's was basically designed to be my introductory podcast from the beginning. But, I was excited about getting the guests on the show and focusing more on them than getting that one out there, because I think our other guests make a whole lot more interesting listens than you guys just listen to me just kind of ramble. But if you're still listening to the podcast, I really appreciate it. One of the things I wanted to do with the podcast is have on a lot of the people that I've really had a lot of interest on. Some of the people I've met, some of the people, stumbled up on in public, or some I know through social media. But really a lot of good people that are doing positive things in life. And I want to focus on those people and highlight those people from athletes, musicians, maybe car enthusiasts. There's a lot of different walks of life, basically people that have different lifestyles. I'll be featuring more guests in 2018. I know I've got at least 3 or 4 people that I'm still waiting to get schedules cleared on, and so just some time to set aside to talk with them and from their busy schedules. But anybody from the beginning until now listening, thank you guys for being a guest on the show. taking the time out. And if you're a listener, I thank you even more. Make sure you go and leave a review on the podcast. And if you took the whole hour to listen to this show, then you know a whole lot more about me than you probably did before. And even the people that think they're really close to me probably know a whole lot more of my life than they did before. So props to you guys. Keep listening. More things coming to you in 2018. More projects from me, more Mega Talks, more Ultimate Expression, more Thompson Defense Academy, a lot of different things. And I even got a couple of surprises that'll be coming up in 2018. So as I say, see you guys. Keep it locked here. And take care. God bless. Wow.